The night was silent but not peaceful. The wind moved through broken towers carrying dust and ash. Long ago this place had been alive with voices and lights, but now it was only a grave of memories. Among the ruins walked a lone figure, a woman unlike any human, her skin pale silver and her eyes glowing faint blue. She was thin, weak, and her steps were slow as if every movement carried pain. Her name was lost, for no one remained to call it anymore. She was the last of her people, or at least she thought so. The war had taken everything, her family, her home, her pride, and even her reason to live. She moved along the empty streets searching for something, anything. Sometimes she found pieces of broken machines, sometimes the burned remains of food packs that could no longer be eaten. Every day was the same, a struggle to keep breathing in a world that no longer wanted her. She wrapped her thin arms around herself, hiding from the cold night air. The stars above glittered, but to her they were cruel, distant fires watching her suffering without care. She remembered how her people once believed the stars were gods, now she hated them, for they had stayed silent when her world was destroyed. Her legs trembled as she reached what had once been a market square. The stalls were shattered, the walls black with burns. She sank down beside a stone column, her chest rising and falling in sharp breaths. She wanted to cry, but she had no tears left. Her heart was empty, like the world around her. The silence was broken. A sound echoed across the ruins, soft but sharp against the stillness. Her pointed ears twitched, her body stiffened. It was a sound she had not heard in years. Footsteps, not the scuttling of wild animals, not the dragging of broken metal, but steady, heavy, purposeful footsteps. Someone was here, moving closer. Her body screamed for her to hide, but she had nowhere to run. She pressed her back to the column, her heart beating fast. Fear filled her, but also curiosity. For who could still walk these streets? The sound grew louder. Dust shifted from cracks as boots pressed against stone. She leaned slightly, her glowing eyes searching through the shadows. Then she saw him. A figure tall and broad, wrapped in armor that caught the moonlight. His face was hidden under a helmet, but his posture was strong. She knew at once what he was. A human. Her breath caught. She had heard of them. Stories whispered long ago before the war. Her people said humans were dangerous, clever, and ruthless. Some said they conquered worlds, others said they saved them. She did not know which was true, but she did know this. No human had any reason to help her. Her heart told her to run, but her legs refused to move. The man stopped, standing in the middle of the broken square. He turned his head slowly, scanning the ruins. Then his eyes, hidden behind the visor, found her. She gasped and tried to shrink into the shadows. The human did not raise a weapon, though he carried one at his side. Instead, he lifted a hand, palm open, a gesture of peace. His voice came, muffled by the helmet, but clear enough to understand the tone. It was calm, steady, not filled with anger. She shook her head, unsure. Why was he here? Why now, after all this time? She stared at him, her thin body trembling. The human took one slow step closer, then stopped again. He reached into a pouch and pulled something out. A small container shining faintly under the starlight. He placed it on the broken stone and stepped back. The alien woman tilted her head, her eyes fixed on the object. Her hunger twisted her stomach, her throat dry and burning. She hesitated, but the human made no move to harm her. She crawled forward, every muscle weak. Her fingers touched the container. Inside was food, real food. Her heart pounded. She could not believe it. She looked up at him with wide eyes. Why would a human give her this? The human stood silent, waiting. He did not demand. He did not threaten. For the first time in many years, the alien woman felt something strange. Not fear, not hate, but confusion mixed with a small spark of hope. The cold wind blew again through the ruins, but now it felt less sharp. She clutched the container close, her glowing eyes still locked on the stranger. Her lips parted, but no words came. What could she say? What could she ask? She only knew one thing. Her world had been empty for so long, and now in the middle of the ruins a human had appeared and nothing would ever be the same again. The woman sat still, her thin hands holding the food container close. She had not tasted real food in so long that her body shook at the smell alone. Her glowing eyes lifted again toward the armored figure standing in the ruined square. The human did not move. He only watched with patience, his hands open to show he meant no harm. His presence was strange to her, like a star had fallen to the ground, bringing both danger and mystery. Slowly, carefully, she opened the container. Inside was soft bread and a small pack of clean water. Her lips trembled as she brought the bread to her mouth. The first bite made her eyes close, the taste filling her empty body with warmth. Tears, long forgotten, touched her cheeks as she swallowed. It was simple food, but to her, it was life itself. The human made no sound, no demand. He only let her eat. She could feel his gaze on her, steady but not cruel, like the watchful gaze of someone who had seen much suffering before. When she finished, she clutched the water, her throat burning with thirst. She drank carefully, afraid that it might vanish if she was too quick. The clean taste was unlike the bitter rainwater she had gathered in broken jars. It soothed her chest and made her heart beat stronger. When she lowered the container, she looked at him again, still not understanding. Why would a human give her kindness when her own people had left her to die? The human finally moved, his boots heavy on the stone. He did not come close enough to frighten her, only a step forward. Then, in a careful motion, he reached to the side of his helmet. There was a soft click and a hiss, and then his face appeared. The woman's eyes widened. She had never seen a human so clearly before. His skin was pale under the moonlight, his eyes dark but not empty. There were lines on his face that spoke of battles fought and pain carried. Yet his gaze was calm, not sharp, not hateful, only human. He spoke. Words. Strange to her ears, she could not understand his language, but his voice carried weight and warmth. It was low, steady, the kind of voice that could guide soldiers or comfort children. She tilted her head, her ears twitching at the rhythm. She tried to respond, but her tongue stumbled, her own language. Broken and unused, their words did not meet, but their eyes did, and sometimes eyes could speak more than voices. The human crouched slowly, lowering himself so he would not tower over her. From his pack he pulled out another item, this one glowing faintly. It was a small cube, a human tool, she guessed. With a press, it unfolded into a hollow screen, bright with shifting lights. Images appeared, pictures of stars, ships, and worlds. Her breath caught as she leaned forward. Among the shifting images, she saw families, children, people laughing and sharing food. Her heart ached, for the images reminded her of a time before war. She pressed a hand to her chest, as if to hold her broken memories inside. The human watched her reaction carefully. Then, with slow fingers, he pointed to the picture of a family on the hollow screen. He tapped his chest and said a word, his name perhaps. Then he pointed to her, waiting. She hesitated, her voice weak, but she whispered the name her mother once gave her. It cracked in, the air like fragile glass, but it was her truth. The human repeated it gently, though his accent was heavy. Her eyes widened again, for it had been so long since anyone had spoken her name. The sound made her feel alive, like a spark in the ashes. Still, she did not trust. Easily her people had been betrayed before. Kindness had often been a mask for cruelty. She studied his face, searching for lies, but all she saw was weariness. The kind of weariness that belonged to someone who had also lost much. She pointed to the food container, and then to him. A silent question. Why? The human did not answer. With words, instead, he reached into his pack again and pulled out another ration. He placed it in front of her, but did not touch it. He wanted her to see that this gift was freely given, without chains, without tricks. The alien woman's hands shook as she stared at the second ration. Hope and fear battled inside her. If she trusted, she might live. If she refused, she might starve. Her glowing eyes rose once more to his dark human gaze, and for the first time she thought maybe the stories were wrong. Maybe humans were not only destroyers. Maybe some were healers too. The night grew colder, the wind stronger. The human stood, scanning the shadows as if ready for danger. She hugged the food close and watched him with wide eyes. A question filled her heart, one she could not yet speak. Would this man stay, or would he vanish like the rest of her world? Her body trembled, but inside her chest, a new warmth was rising. It was not just the food or water. It was the first flicker of trust, the first fragile seed of hope. And though she was afraid, she wanted to believe that this stranger from the stars might change everything. The alien woman woke with the first light of dawn touching the broken city. The ruins glowed faintly as the sun rose, but the world still felt heavy and dead. She opened her eyes slowly, clutching the food container she had kept close through the night. Her body was weak, but she was alive, and that alone was something rare. The human was still there, sitting a short distance away, his back against a crumbled wall. He had not left her. He had not vanished like a dream. He was real, and that truth filled her with both comfort and fear. She watched him for a long time. Unsure of what to do, he had removed his helmet, letting the light fall on his tired face. His eyes were closed, but his breathing was steady, like a warrior who could rest even in danger. She wondered why he had stayed, why he had not simply given food and walked away. Did he want something in return? Or was this truly kindness? Her heart did not know the answer, but she wanted to find out. When the human opened his eyes, he found her staring. For a moment, they simply looked at one another. No words, no clear understanding, only silence filled with unspoken questions. Then he smiled, a small, tired smile, but gentle. The alien woman tilted her head, confused by the expression. She had not seen a smile in so many years that it looked strange, almost unreal. Yet something about it warmed her chest. The human stood and stretched his arms, his armor shifting with a faint hum. He pointed to the broken shelter she had been using, the collapsed roof barely standing. Then he pointed to his tools and back to her. She frowned, not understanding, until he moved closer and gently touched one of the fallen beams. With strong, careful hands, he lifted it away, clearing the rubble. Her eyes widened as she realized what he meant. He wanted to help repair her shelter. For a moment, she was frozen. Why would a human rebuild something for her? She stepped back nervously, but he did not force her. He simply worked, pulling broken metal aside, using strange human tools that sparked with energy. The sound of cutting and grinding filled the air as he reshaped the ruined walls. She watched, half afraid, half amazed. It was as if he was fighting the ruins themselves. Piece by midday, the shelter stood stronger than before, not perfect but safe when he was done. He wiped sweat from his brow and looked at her with a questioning gaze. She realized he was asking if it was good enough. Her throat felt tight, but she nodded slowly. The human gave another small smile, as if her approval meant something to him. She did not know why, but her chest ached in a way that was not pain. It was something else, something she had not felt since childhood. She whispered a word in her own language, a word that meant thanks. The human tilted his head, not understanding the word, but he seemed to feel the meaning. He touched his chest lightly and nodded in return. The rest of the day passed with small exchanges. The woman pointed at objects, saying their names softly in her language. The human repeated them clumsily, his accent heavy, his voice stumbling, but patient. Then he pointed to his own things, naming them in human words. She struggled, her tongue twisting on strange sounds, but she tried. Sometimes they laughed, though she did not know laughter could still exist inside her. Their voices built a bridge, fragile but real, and though they could not yet speak fully, they began to understand each other. Later, when the sky grew darker and shadows stretched long, the woman sat near the fire he had built. She held her thin hands close to the warmth, feeling alive for the first time in years. The human sat across from her, repairing a piece of his equipment, the sparks lighting his face. For a long time, She only watched him. In her mind, memories of her people came back, how they had once gathered together, how kindness had been normal now. Kindness was a rare treasure and it came from a human. It was strange, but it felt right. The silence was broken by the distant cry of wild beasts. The woman flinched, fear rushing into her chest, but the human reached calmly for his weapon. Holding it with practiced ease, he scanned the shadows, his body tense but his face steady. She realized then that he was not only here to give food, not only here to build, he was here to protect her. The thought struck her harder than she expected. Why would a human fight for her? Why would he risk anything in a world already broken? She curled closer to the fire, eyes fixed on him. She wanted to ask, but her words were too weak. Instead, she pressed a hand to her chest, the sign her people once used for hope. The human looked at her, confusion flickering. Then something softened in his gaze. He repeated the gesture, pressing his own hand to his chest. Her breath caught, her eyes wide. For the first time, someone understood. The language of kindness was not spoken in words. It was spoken in actions, in gestures, in the willingness to stand beside another. That night, as the fire burned low and the stars turned overhead, the alien woman lay inside her repaired shelter, warmer than she had been in years, her body still weak, but her heart a little stronger. She whispered her name again into the darkness, as if to remind herself she still existed, and this time she did not feel alone. For outside, a human sat awake, watching the ruins, guarding her with steady eyes, and though she could not yet trust fully, though she still feared what tomorrow would bring, she carried one truth with her into sleep. The human had given her something no one else had, a chance to believe again, a chance to hope. The fire had burned down to faint embers, yet the human still sat awake, his back against the wall, his eyes sharp, scanning the shadows like a sentinel. The alien woman slept inside her repaired shelter, her breath shallow but steady. For the first time in years, she had slept without fear that the night would swallow her, but dreams still haunted her. And when she stirred, memories rose like ghosts. She woke before dawn, her heart pounding, her eyes wet. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against her chest. The human noticed, leaning forward, his face lined with concern. She shook her head, trying to hide her, trembling, but the past would not stay buried. Her people were gone, wiped away by fire and iron, and every memory of them burned behind her eyes. Long ago, before the war, her people had walked proudly. They had songs, rituals, and laughter that echoed through wide halls carved into stone. Children played in the courtyards. Elders told stories of the stars. She remembered the soft voice of her mother, the strong hands of her father. She remembered warmth, love, and safety. All of it had been torn away. The enemy had come without mercy, burning villages, destroying towers. Her people had begged for help from the stars, but none came. Not until it was too late. Her body bore the scars, faint lines across her arms, her back, her face. They were reminders of whips, of fire, of chains she had once worn. When she looked at the human now, her heart was caught between fear and longing, because her people had spoken of humans as both destroyers and saviors. Some said humans had brought war to faraway worlds. Others said humans had lifted broken nations. Which was true, she did not know. But when she looked at this man sitting quietly by her side, she felt torn. The human spoke softly, words she could not understand. Yet the tone was gentle, low, as if meant to calm her. He saw her shaking hands and reached slowly into his pack. From it he drew a small hollow device. With a flicker of light, images appeared in the air. Her glowing eyes widened as she leaned closer. There, on the hollow screen, was not a weapon, not a map of conquest, but a family. She saw a woman with kind eyes, a child running with laughter. She saw joy, not war. The human touched the image of the child, then touched his chest. The message was clear even without words. He too had lost something precious. The alien woman's throat tightened. She pressed her fingers against her own scars, then slowly pulled back her sleeve. For the first time, She showed him the marks burned into her skin. The human's eyes darkened with sorrow as he gazed at the wounds, but he did not look away and he did not pity her. He only nodded once as if to say, "I see you, I understand." That silent recognition made her chest ache in a new way, not with despair, but with connection. She whispered words in her own tongue. They spilled out like broken glass, sharp with pain. He could not understand them, but her trembling voice told him everything. She spoke of fire, of chains, of nights spent hiding in shadows. She spoke of losing her family, her people, her hope. Her voice cracked, and she pressed her face into her hands. The human sat still for a long moment. Then he placed his hand gently on the ground between them, palm open, not touching her but close enough to be felt. It was not force. It was invitation. Her breath caught, her eyes wet. Slowly, she reached out and placed her hand near his, not touching but close. Two broken souls sharing the same silence. The day grew brighter, sunlight spilling across the ruins. They worked side by side, though little needed fixing. The human gathered, scraps of metal reforging them into tools. The woman guided him to places she remembered, pointing at broken machines. Together they cleared rubble, small tasks that gave shape to the emptiness. And with each task, she felt her chest lighten, not because the ruins were fixed, but because she no longer carried the weight alone. At midday, while they rested, the woman tried again to shape human words. She touched her chest and said softly, "Friend." Her voice stumbled, but the sound was clear. The human's eyes widened. Then he smiled, a real smile, full and bright. He repeated the word with warmth, "Friend." The simple word wrapped around her like a cloak. It was more powerful than any weapon, because for the first time since the war, she was not alone. Yet, deep in her heart, the scars still whispered. Could this last, or would it vanish like everything else? She knew danger still stalked the ruins, raiders, scavengers, and creatures that hunted the weak. But for now, sitting beside a human who offered her kindness instead of cruelty, she allowed herself something she thought she would never feel again. She allowed herself to hope. That night, when the stars lit the sky, she looked up without hatred. She whispered her family's names into the air. The human sat quietly, listening, though he did not know the words. And in that moment, the stars above seemed less cruel, because for the first time she did not face them alone. The days that followed moved slowly, yet they were unlike any the alien woman had known for years. For so long each sunrise had been a burden, another day of hunger, another day of silence. But now the mornings came with something different, a reason to rise, a reason to breathe. The human was there, steady as the rising sun, and with him came change. He was not a man of many words, at least not ones she could understand, yet his actions spoke louder than language. When she woke shivering, he shared the warmth of the fire. When she stumbled while searching through the ruins, he offered his hand. When the fear of shadows gripped her heart, he stood guard with weapon ready. Slowly, she realized that he was not here to take, he was here to give. And that truth was both terrifying and beautiful. The woman began to practice the sounds of his tongue. At first they were broken and heavy, falling from her lips like stones, but the human never mocked, never grew impatient. He repeated each word slowly, pointing to objects, to himself, to her. One evening, as the fire cracked softly, she touched her chest and whispered the word again, "Friend." The human's smile was wide, his eyes bright as he repeated it back to her. In that simple exchange, she felt a bridge forming, fragile but strong enough to hold her heart. She wanted to teach him as well, so she showed him gestures her people once used, signs carried through generations. She pressed 2 fingers to her chest and spread her hand outward, a sign that meant hope. The human studied her carefully, then copied the motion, clumsy but respectful. When he performed it back to her, she felt her breath catch, for in that single gesture, it was as If her culture had not been erased, it still lived. Carried now in human hands together, they rebuilt more than just her shelter. They scavenged for broken wires, scraps of energy cells, and shattered panels. The human, with his strange tools, could breathe new life into machines she had long thought dead. He showed her how to fix small things, how to bind wires and seal cracks. Her hands were clumsy, but under his patient gaze she learned each task gave her strength, not only to survive but to believe she could build again. Sometimes she caught him looking at the sky, his face heavy with thought. She wondered if he missed his people, his home, his family, just as she missed hers. But he never spoke of it. He only carried that silence like a weight on his shoulders. She wished she could ease it the way he had eased hers. So one night, she whispered softly in her language, telling the stars that they were not cruel anymore, because now she was not alone. The human could not understand her words, but he watched her, and his eyes softened as if he knew the meaning anyway. The ruins no longer felt like a tomb. They felt like a place of beginnings. There were moments of laughter now, rare and quiet, but real. When she mispronounced human words, he laughed gently, then tried her language and failed even harder. They shared the sound of laughter until the ruins themselves seemed to echo with life again. In those moments, she could almost forget the scars on her body, almost forget the endless years of pain. For the present was filled with warmth, but danger was never far. Some nights the air carried distant howls, creatures that hunted in packs. The human always rose with his weapon, his eyes sharp as steel. And the woman felt fear again, but also something new. She felt trust, because when the shadows moved, she knew he would stand between her and the darkness. That trust was something her people had lost long ago. Yet here it was, reborn one afternoon. While searching through the remains of an old tower, she found something hidden under rubble. It was a small trinket, a charm of her people. Her hands trembled as she held it, the symbol of her family carved into the metal. Tears stung her eyes as she pressed it close. Whispering the names of those she had lost, the human watched her, silent. Then, without asking, he knelt and helped her clean the dust from the charm. He held it carefully with respect before giving it back to her. Her chest ached with gratitude so deep it hurt, for he had not only given her food, shelter, and protection, he had given her back a piece of her soul. That night, as firelight danced on the walls, she spoke again, her words slow, broken, but true. "You, stay," she said, pointing to him, then to herself. "We, together." The human's eyes widened, then softened. He nodded once, firm and steady, and repeated her words. "Together." The sound of it in his voice made her heart tremble. It was more than a promise. It was a vow. She lay awake long, after he slept, staring at the faint glow of the stars. Her scars still burned in memory, her people were still gone. But for the first time in so long, the weight of despair had lifted. She no longer wanted to disappear into the silence. Instead, she wanted to rise, to walk forward, to rebuild. Because now she had a friend, she had hope. And hope, she realized, was stronger than fear. Hope could carry her into tomorrow. Hope could even change the fate of worlds. The ruins had grown quieter over the past days, but silence was never safe. The alien woman and the human worked side by side, searching through broken towers, repairing small machines and gathering supplies. For the first time in years, her heart felt lighter, yet deep inside she knew peace could not last. The world was cruel, and cruelty always found its way back. It came at dusk, when the sky bled, orange and shadows stretched long across the streets. The woman was sorting through scrap near the old square when the air filled with a harsh sound. Engines, rough and heavy, tearing through the silence like thunder. Her body froze, her breath caught, her glowing eyes wide with terror. She knew that sound. She remembered it from the war. Raiders. The human turned sharply, his instincts quick, his weapon already in his hands, his face hardened, all gentleness gone, replaced by steel and focus. The woman trembled, fear rising like fire in her chest. Through the dust she saw them, vehicles patched together from rust and bone, engines growling like beasts. On them rode figures wrapped in ragged armor, their eyes wild, their weapons sharp. They were scavengers who preyed on the weak, hunters, who took and killed without thought, and they had found her. She stumbled back, clutching the charm of her people close to her chest. The human stepped forward, placing himself between her and the approaching raiders. His stance was firm, steady, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. He raised his weapon, a sleek rifle that glowed faintly with energy. The raiders shouted, their laughter cruel as they circled closer. They thought it would be easy prey, one alien woman and one lone human. But they were wrong. The first shot cracked like lightning. The human fired with precision, the blast striking a raider's vehicle and sending it crashing into rubble. The others roared in anger, their engines screaming as they charged forward. The woman gasped, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. The human shouted, something, his voice sharp and commanding, though she could not understand the words. He did not retreat. He advanced, moving with skill born of countless battles. The raiders fired back, bullets and plasma bolts tearing through the air. Sparks flew as walls shattered, dust filled the square. The woman crouched low, her hands pressed to her ears, her body shaking. Every sound reminded her of the war. Every flash of fire was a memory of her people's end. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But her legs would not obey. Yet through the chaos, she saw him, her human, standing tall, fighting not for conquest but for her. He moved like a shield, always keeping his body between her and the raiders. Every shot he fired was careful. Every step he took was meant to protect. He was outnumbered, yet he did not falter. The woman felt something stir inside her chest, stronger than fear, stronger than despair. It was courage, borrowed from him, a raider broke through the smoke, rushing toward her with a jagged blade. Her body froze, her voice caught, but before the blade could fall, the human was there. He tackled the raider with brutal force, knocking him into the dirt. With a swift motion, he ended the threat, his eyes burning with fire. Then he turned back to her, his hand reaching out. "Run!" He barked in his tongue, the words sharp and clear, even if she did not know all of it. She understood the meaning, and she obeyed. They moved together through the ruins, the human firing behind them, the raiders shouting as they gave chase. Explosions shook the broken walls. Dust rained from above. The woman stumbled, but the human caught her arm, pulling her to her feet. His grip was strong, unyielding, a lifeline in the storm. For every step she wanted to give up, he pulled her forward, refusing to let her fall. At last, they reached the old marketplace where the shelter stood. The human pushed her inside and turned to face the entrance, his weapon raised. The raiders came, their shadows long and jagged in the firelight. The battle raged, louder, fiercer, until the night itself seemed to scream. The alien woman could not stay hidden. Not this time. Her heart burned, her fear turned into something else. Determination. She grabbed a piece of broken metal, sharp, like a blade, and stepped out. Her body shook, but her eyes were fierce. When one of the raiders rushed the human from behind, she struck. The blow was clumsy, weak, but enough to stagger the enemy. The human turned, finishing the fight with swift precision. For a moment he looked at her with shock, then pride. Together they fought, human and alien. Two souls who had once been broken but now stood as one. When the last raider fell, silence returned to the ruins. The air was thick with smoke, the ground littered with wreckage. The woman dropped the piece of metal, her hands shaking, her breath ragged. The human lowered his weapon slowly, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. For a long time, they only stared at each other in the fire-lit ruins, her glowing eyes wide, his dark gaze steady. No, words were needed, for the truth was clear. They had survived because they had stood together. The woman's heart pounded as she pressed her hand to her chest, the sign of hope. The human mirrored it, his own hand steady, his face calm despite the battle. Tears blurred her vision, but they were not only of fear, they were of something new, something bright. She realized then that his compassion was not weakness. It was strength, greater than any weapon. And with it, He had given her something she thought she had lost forever. Not just survival, but a future. The ruins were quiet again, but the silence was no longer the same. It was not the silence of emptiness, nor the silence of death. It was the silence that followed survival, the kind that carried heavy breaths and trembling hands. The alien woman stood among the broken square, her thin frame shaking but her eyes glowing brighter than before. The human stood beside her, his weapon lowered, his armor scarred, his face lined with exhaustion. They had faced fire, blood, and shadows, and yet they were still standing together. The ground was littered with the wreckage of the raiders. Smoke curled into the night sky, fading into the cold stars. The woman stared at the destruction with wide eyes, the memories of war still heavy on her chest, but this time something was different. She had not hidden. She had not been silent. She had stood. She had fought. And she had survived. For years she believed she was broken, but now she realized there was still strength inside her, strength awakened by kindness and carried by hope. The human looked at her, his dark eyes steady. He spoke, low and calm, though she could not understand the words, but she understood the tone. It was not the command of a soldier, nor the warning of a stranger. It was the voice of someone saying, "You are not alone anymore." Her throat tightened and she pressed her hand to her chest, the gesture of her people, the sign of hope. The human mirrored her, his own hand pressed firmly against his chest. In that moment, she felt her world shift. She had thought hope was a memory, but here it was alive, carried by both alien and human hands. The days that followed were hard, yet lighter than before. The raiders had been driven away, but danger still lingered in the ruins. The human kept watch, repairing his weapon and scavenging for supplies. The woman worked beside him, her fear tempered by courage. Each small task felt meaningful now, each moment a piece of a future she never imagined could exist. One morning, as the sun rose, the human packed his bag. The woman watched, confusion on her face, her chest tight with worry. Was he leaving? Had their time ended? But then he turned and pointed to the horizon, the endless wasteland beyond the ruins. He touched his chest, then pointed to her, then back to the horizon. The meaning was clear. He was not leaving her behind, he was asking her to come with him. Her heart raced, her breath caught. For so long she had been bound to the ruins, chained by loss and despair. The thought of stepping beyond them terrified her, but when she looked at him, steady and patient, she felt the weight of choice. And for the first time in her life, the choice was hers. She pressed her hand to the charm of her people, whispering their names softly. Then she lifted her gaze, her eyes glowing with new fire. She nodded, her voice trembling but firm. "Together," she said, the word broken but true. The human's face softened into a smile, and he repeated, "Together." They left the ruins as the sun climbed higher. The broken city faded behind them, its shadows long and cold. The woman looked back once, her heart heavy but not with despair. She carried her people with her, their memory alive in her steps. The human walked at her side, steady as always, his presence like a shield. The road ahead was unknown, filled with danger, filled with uncertainty. But for the first time, she did not fear it, because she no longer walked alone. As days passed, the land around them changed. Fields of stone gave way to hills of dust. Rivers of ash turned to streams of water. The woman felt strength return to her body, her steps no longer weak but firm. She learned more human words, her voice gaining confidence. He learned more of her gestures, his hands shaping signs of her people with care. Together, they built a language that was theirs alone, a language born of survival, of compassion, of hope. At night, when they rested under the stars, she no longer hated their light, she whispered to them, not with bitterness but with quiet courage. The human would listen, sometimes closing his eyes, sometimes smiling faintly. It was as if he too found comfort in the stars when they shared them together. Weeks later, when they reached the edge of a valley where the ruins gave way to green, the woman stopped, her eyes wide. Grass stretched across the earth, the air filled with the scent of life. She had forgotten what living land looked like. Her breath shook, tears burning her eyes. The human placed his hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her. She pressed her fingers to her chest, the sign of hope. And this time, she did not do it alone. The human joined her, and together they stood at the edge of a new world. The alien woman had once believed she had nothing. Her people gone, her world broken, her heart shattered. But compassion had come to her in the form of a human, a stranger who gave food, warmth, and protection, a friend who gave her strength, courage, and trust. And now, as the dawn painted the sky with gold, she realized the truth. She had lost everything. Yet she had gained something far greater. She had gained hope. And sometimes hope was enough to rebuild an entire world.